Hey everyone, and welcome to Rambling Reviews, where we analyze different types of media and or their cultural relevance. My name's Christian, and this is Resident Evil, specifically the prequel comic adaptation released to kind of coincide with and promote the upcoming game at the time. Now, this was released as a tie-in comic and published by Marvel, which has a ton of different people credited to it. So we're just going to go through all of them because I don't really know who specifically to say, like, this is the main person who wrote it or this is the main person who illustrated it, anything like that. So what we have here is, according to the issue itself, the plot was by Desmond Church and Chris Kramer, but the script was by Dan Shaheen and Chris Kramer, and Simone Sedoux. It's Seydous. I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce that. Again, forgive my pronunciation on especially non-English names. And even if that is English, sorry. The art and color design was by Dave Johnson. It was lettered by, which means the person that actually wrote out the the speech bubbles and stuff. Lettered by Ed Hendricks, and the interior color, as the comic says, was by Moose Bauman, Baumann. The cover was done by a Bill, again, forgive my pronunciation here, Sienkiewicz. It's Sienkiewicz. And it was all edited by a Mark Panacea, Paniccia. I don't know, man, these names. Anyway, all of those people went into creating this. Now, this comic adaptations and, things that serve as a vector to, promote the upcoming product have always been kind of a mixed bag. Some of them are really good. Some of them are not good at all. I think this one's pretty interesting. With this, we're not going through, directly the series of Resident Evil or anything like that. What we're actually doing here is we're more specifically, it's a prequel, where we're going to be going through the events leading up to the main characters of the game entering the Spencer Mansion and everything of that nature. So, with that all in mind, let's get into it. The story begins with Richard explaining about how essentially he and the rest of the team entered into the mansion and they really don't know what's going on. They're just suddenly surrounded by all of these, monsters and zombies and things of that nature. I do want to mention, by the way, in the Rambling review of the Resident Evil game, I had mentioned that they don't really, call the undead zombies. That was a misspeak on my end. They do often refer to them as zombies. It's just interesting that, especially in the first, when they first meet the zombies at the beginning, they don't kind of immediately put together, oh god, that's a zombie, Maybe it's just because zombies are more in the cultural zeitgeist now. But, we did have things like, of course, Dawn of the Dead and stuff, so it's not like, zombies were this unknown creature or anything, unknown, fictional monster creature or anything, but either way. So we have Brad frantically trying to get a hold of Wesker and the rest of the Alpha team. And we do see, he's not understanding why Wesker's not picking up or anything, and we do actually see here that Wesker is, in fact, picking up the phone, but not for Richard here. Instead, he's picking it up for, as we can see, Umbrella, as he speaks to a shady member of the organization, apparently by the name of Holden here, essentially orchestrating the whole thing, where Wesker explains that, he essentially had to send out a team in order to save face. And one of the things, he also explains to Holden about how, don't worry, they had helicopter trouble, and, he basically, the whole thing's supposed to be sabotage. But I want to point out here, we see Holden with a umbrella mug. Now, a mug with the umbrella symbol has become a staple in the franchise for a while. But the funny thing about this is, as we look at this mug, we see that specifically, it doesn't look anything like what we see the umbrella symbol to actually be. even in the first game itself, as this is like, I don't even know. It's just like a circle with UMB and a cane, supposed to be like an umbrella cane. So, I mean, it's something, but it's just like, what the hell? Like, it's wild, you know? It does make me wonder as well, what kind of notes were the writers and artists given about Resident Evil when they were making this comic? Obviously, they knew that Wesker was double-crossing them and in some capacity working for Umbrella. And, you know, it's interesting because a lot of different adaptations and stuff don't really get that many notes as far as how the final product is going to play out. They also get these notes in like early stages of development. So, you know, and there are even examples with like the Archie Sonic comics. Ken Penders infamously never actually played the games or was familiar with Sonic at all outside of like, I don't know, maybe like a simple blurb you can find on Wikipedia. Of course, Ken Pontic and Warren Graff, who wrote the Sonic games, well, the English version at least, the scripts, throughout the 2010s, didn't really do much more research than reading a Wikipedia entry either. But look, that's neither here nor there. Point is, it's interesting to think and wonder what kind of notes these guys were actually given, because it could have been not a lot. It could have been all that Capcom had at the time of, you know, producing Resident Evil. We don't really know, but it's interesting to see how these things play out. But here we also have the introduction of Barry. And it's interesting to think because, you know, if you are familiar with the game of Resident Evil, which I hope you are if you're watching this, you'd know that, of course, there was the whole thing where Barry was working with Wesker because he had his wife and kids kidnapped for a bit, where he later, you know, broke free from Wesker's control and all that, you know, all that good stuff. But what's interesting about this is that when he talks to Wesker, you know, Wesker basically says, because he answers and he asks how are the kids, which I thought, you know, might have meant something in relation to his own kids. But in actuality, you know, he's asking about, you know, the kids, Bravo team. And Wesker doesn't really, you know, talk like he's got, like he's blackmailing, or not really blackmailing, but, you know, like he's got anything over, Barry, like Barry's under any kind of duress or anything, but rather that he's just like, oh, you know, their helicopter fucked up and now they're trapped in this horrific mansion. We have to go save them, basically. They ran into trouble and we have to go save them. You know, and we have this interesting moment where we even have Barry, you know, questioning him, you know, kind of wondering, he's like, well, you know, why were they even sent into that? Like, you knew they weren't prepared for this kind of thing. And we have, you know, Wesker being very angry. He's like, I'm sorry, are you giving me orders now? Are you asking me questions? You have this whole bit, right? And it leads me to wonder, was there, like, at what point, if, you know, at what point was it that we had that, you know, Barry and Wesker specifically had the conversation where he knew what was up? Was it before they entered the mansion, after they entered the mansion? Like, what actually happened here? You know what I mean? Was it one of the points where Jill and Barry were split up and Wesker kind of met up with him and told him what was what, you know, at that point? Or like, when exactly did this happen? Because as we go through this comic here, we're going to see that it definitely seems like Barry's on, you know, that he doesn't know anything about Wesker, and he's very much on, you know, everybody's side and isn't a double crosser or anything yet. So, you know, a double agent or anything. So, but either way, moving on. Now, I do want to point out here, I really like this moment where we actually see the sleeping quarters of the members of STARS here as Wesker barges in to wake everybody up. You know, it's one of those little bits of detail that it doesn't really matter per se, but it's just kind of fun to see and, you know, realize, you know, just kind of get a, you know, it just kind of adds to like world building and, in a way, character development. It makes it feel more, you know, more kind of lived in, and like these characters are people, you know, with like their own lives and everything. So yeah, it's pretty cool. Back at the mansion, we do actually see Richard kind of fumbling around and accidentally setting off traps and stuff. I think this is interesting because on one hand, it shows, you know, Bravo team, or at least Richard's kind of incompetence as a Bravo member, and it's also an interesting way to kind of show some of the traps and things that you will experience actually playing the game. And here we're introduced to the team proper, as we have from left to right Barry, Jill, Brad, Joseph, who doesn't last long, as you remember from the actual game, and Chris Redfield himself. Interesting fact, something I didn't mention before, is that you see him smoking a cigarette here. There were actually early versions of the game, especially when this was released in America, that actually edited out his cigarette. I don't know exactly why, especially when the game had as much like violence and gore and stuff, especially for the time, as it did. But interesting, I guess. Now, one thing that I do want to point out here as well is that for some reason, when they were drawing Wesker, or rather coloring him in, they decided to give him orange shades, which, I mean, on one hand, it leads to cool shots like this, but on the other hand, dude's shades are black, not orange. So again, with the whole notes thing, as I mentioned before, it leads me to wonder if his shades were originally going to be orange, and those are the notes that the artists of this comic ran with. But something that does stay true to the actual game here and works very well as a prequel is, as Richard is doing his thing and Wesker's explaining to everybody essentially that, they're in over their heads, we don't really know what we're up against, and Jill even questioned him, she's like, wait a minute, you don't really think there's something that we can't handle, right? Like, there's no shot. However, we do see back in the mansion, Richard coming face to face with that giant snake that, as we know, of course, poisons him, where he then meets Rachel later and says, this house is dangerous. Like, come on, dude, that line delivery. So then we have the team members of the Alpha unit discussing everything, and Jill especially expressing concerns that Wesker's not being totally honest with them. And one of the oddest panels I've ever seen, where the panel is just the entirety of Jill's face. Now, I know what they were going for. It's supposed to be a close-up, like if a camera closed up on her face. I get that, but my god, it looks weird to just have a panel of just her face looking all square like this. In any case, her and the others, of course, are discussing everything, and we have Barry, being, just kind of saying like, oh, don't worry, I'm sure the team is fine. We're gonna help them out. Everything's gonna be all right. That kind of thing. And I just wonder, right? Because Chris makes a remark where he says he's an optimist, where Barry says a little optimism goes a long way in this line of work. And I just wonder, is this meant to be like cluing in the audience here in that, yeah, Barry knows something you guys don't know. Is this the point? Maybe after this, did Wesker or after they woke everybody up, did Wesker later take Barry aside and tell him, like, yo, I got your wife and kids, you got to do what I say? Because, again, we didn't really see in the beginning that Barry and Wesker were, like, in cahoots or anything. But at this point, we are kind of seeing that might be a possibility. But with all that said, we're finally nearing the end of the prequel, as we have a group shot of the team all jumping out, everyone basically just saying like, all right, let's be prepared, let's do this, all that kind of thing, right? And that's the end. And then we have, of course, to be continued in the game at the end there. I thought overall this was a very good prequel. Very good, very fun, kind of adds some additional context to the beginning. It's interesting to see how, Richard, dealt with everything when he first got into the mansion, as well as he comments, if you actually read the comic, he comments about how, like, the others got lost and everything. He doesn't know where, Rebecca is, for example, and of course later, Chris will run into her and things of that nature. But, this was a very well done issue. I think it works really well as a as a comic issue in and of itself, and it works really well as something getting you interested to play the game, which is of course what it was designed for. So I think it's very interesting to kind of see the events leading up to the actual game, what was transpiring here. It's interesting to see, like, what were people's reactions when they got the call? What were they thinking going into this? All these different things, right? So, yeah, no, I quite liked this. I thought it was really good. Definitely worth a read if you want to find and read this comic somehow. But, yeah, that, that's it. Not really too much more to say. There was those weird kind of, if I gave any critiques, it would be Wesker's orange glasses, the umbrella mug having the wrong umbrella logo, and that odd panel of Jill's face. Other than that, everything else is really good, really well done comic, well, illustrated, story was told well, all that good stuff. And again, it does definitely get you excited for and want to, play the game. Or if you're reading it after playing the game, it gives some added context, as a prequel, before the game actually goes. So, yeah. Either way, as always, these are my thoughts. Let me know what yours are in the comments down below. Follow me on social media for more. Subscribe and ring the bell to stay up to date. Leave a like if you like. And if not, I hope you find something to do like. Later, guys. Peace and love.